Welcome back to Birds of a Feather. This is your Baltimore Sports Podcast. And wow, this has been an insane last 24 hours for the Baltimore Ravens. They have been at the front line of all sort of news, and they have been pretty much the center of attention. Them and the Raiders have pretty much been the center of attention over the last 24 hours in terms of all of the NFL news that has been going on. And it's up to you guys, the way that you interpret everything. I'm going to give my opinions on everything. I'm going to kind of break down everything that we have learned over the last 24 hours because it has been pretty insane. And it's been about 24 hours since we learned the news that the Baltimore Ravens have backed out of the trade agreement for Maxx Crosby. As you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the actual graphic that the Raiders posted last night. It says the Baltimore Ravens have backed out of our trade agreement for Maxx Crosby. We will have no further comment at this time. And obviously, when this happened, Ravens fans everywhere started freaking out because obviously this free agency has been very rough for the Ravens. We're going to go over a graphic in just a second over all the guys that the Ravens have lost and some of the guys that the Ravens were able to sign today. But there's a lot going on with the Ravens. There is a lot of different things going on. Obviously, we back out of the Maxx Crosby trade because of a failed physical and what we learned about his knee and what we learned about some stuff after talking to more doctors. There was reports that we talked to 5 or 6 other doctors, including the number one knee specialist doctor in the world, Dr. Chris Cooper. We talked to him about Maxx Crosby's knee, and a lot of the doctors kind of all came into agreement and said that the long-term aspect of Maxx Crosby does not look very promising. And obviously you're not going to trade 2 first-round picks for someone who you don't trust is going to make at least 4 to 5 impactful years on your franchise. And they were saying that maybe in the next 2, 3, 4 years that it can really start deteriorating with his knee, and there's a bunch of wear and tear, and just things aren't looking right for the future of Maxx Crosby, even though he might be fine this year, or he maybe not. There's a ton of stuff that is a part of this whole thing. The Ravens didn't necessarily really trust the whole knee situation, and they backed out of the deal because they just didn't want to commit 2 first-round picks to someone that they didn't know was going to be healthy. And that's pretty much the summarization of what happened from the Ravens side. But then obviously there's a bunch of conspiracy theories that will come out. Did the Ravens pull out of this because they had cold feet and they saw how their free agency was going? They saw that they let a bunch of free agents walk and they kind of got scared, so they wanted to back out of this and then end up pivoting to signing Trey Hendrickson. And again, as I just said, the Ravens did end up pivoting to signing Trey Hendrickson. And again, there is a lot of different things that happened today, and I wanted to wait until the end of today before we learned all this stuff. So yes, the Ravens did sign Trey Hendrickson from the Cincinnati Bengals. Well, he was a free agent, but he was by far the best free agent available. The Ravens sign Trey Hendrickson. They pivot off of the Maxx Crosby deal. They sign Trey Hendrickson, and they also keep their first-round picks. But the way that people will look at it is that the Ravens got off of the Crosby deal because they would rather have Hendrickson and keep their picks than just have Crosby, who's on a bum knee or a potential bum knee. So you can look at it in whatever way you want. People are going to have their opinions. People are going to think that the Ravens did some sneaky stuff and pulled out of a trade agreement of this big of magnitude, and that we're in the wrong, and people can think that way, and that's whatever. I don't know if there's any sort of way that we can persuade people's opinions on this, but for me, and from the reports that we heard today about how there were 6 total doctors that reviewed Maxx Crosby's knee, you look at everything that the Ravens were giving up to get him, and they just did not think that it was worth the risk of trading for someone who you don't think is going to be an absolute game wrecker, impactful player like we know Maxx Crosby's been throughout his career. So it's a very scary situation. It was a very weird situation as well because of how big of a trade this was, and the Ravens end up backing out of it, which was weird. But when you think of it from the Ravens' perspective, and also Eric DeCosta had a press conference earlier today talking about just the whole situation, and you could tell by the tone in his voice how badly he wanted Maxx Crosby to be a Raven. I mean, he said he was gutted by it. He said he feels terrible for him. He was saying that like no one really has it worse than the player in that situation, and he was pretty much, you could tell that he was absolutely devastated that he wasn't going to get Maxx Crosby. He also mentioned that having Maxx Crosby and signing Trey Hendrickson was also a potential thing that they wanted to do. They didn't end up re-signing Tyler Linderbaum. Again, we're going to go over all the free agents that the Ravens lost because that is an entirely different situation, but once the Ravens knew that they weren't going to get Tyler Linderbaum back, they started exploring the idea of having Crosby and Trey Hendrickson both being acquired by the Ravens. Obviously, they end up, backing out of the Crosby deal, getting their first-round picks back, and then pivoting to making sure that we making sure that we signed Trey Hendrickson, which is what we ended up doing. But there's just a lot of conspiracy theories around it, like whether the Ravens were being sneaky, whether it was like a faithful thing to do from the Ravens' perspective or side of things. And people are going to think whatever they want, and we're really probably never going to know the true behind-the-scenes reason behind it all. So it's just going to leave everyone up to assumption of what happened or what truly happened. Maybe we'll learn it from Maxx Crosby himself. But as of right now, and what we know with the Ravens right now, and kind of what we can take moving forward into this offseason, is that the Ravens traded for Maxx Crosby. They traded their 2026 first-round pick, which was pick 14, and they traded their 2027 first-round pick for Maxx Crosby, who still has 3 years left on his contract, 28 years old, going to be 29 by the time the season starts, and someone who is an absolute game wrecker. And then, just 4 days later, the Ravens back out of the deal because we failed him on his physical, and we also learned from a bunch of different doctors that his knee injury could potentially be something that is pretty serious long term. And again, you're not going to commit 2 first-round picks for someone who you don't know if they're going to legitimately be a game wrecker for you. So it was just too big of a risk for the Ravens. So they backed out of the deal. They were already having discussions about pairing Trey Hendrickson with Maxx Crosby. So now that they backed out of the Crosby deal, there was reports that Trey Hendrickson was going to make his decision today. And the rumors that we ended up learning was that he was going to sign with the Colts before the Ravens did a full pivot to Trey Hendrickson. They ended up calling him this morning. The Colts were going to give him around $25 million per year over 4 years, and the Ravens went out and offered him a 4-year, $112 million deal with $60 million guaranteed. The incentives take it up to $120 million, and he's getting about $28 million per year. I think Trey Hendrickson wanted around $30 to $35 million in free agency, but I just don't think teams wanted to commit that to someone who's 31. So the Ravens went out, they pivoted to Trey Hendrickson, they gave him what he wanted. We had to lower his price a little bit as free agency went on over the past couple of days. But we gave Trey Hendrickson $28 million per year, and now he is with the Ravens. And the Ravens, once again, have their elite pass rusher, but in this time, it's Trey Hendrickson and not Maxx Crosby. If you go back on this channel, the last video I made was on Friday when we traded for Maxx Crosby, and I was freaking out because of how big of a deal it was. And now, over the past 24 hours, a lot of things have changed. The Ravens have lost a ton of free agents. They've lost a ton of their own free agents. They backed out of the Crosby deal, and then they pivoted this morning to signing Trey Hendrickson, and they also end up keeping their 2 first-round picks. So the big question that everyone is talking about is, would you rather have Maxx Crosby and no first-round picks for this year or next year? Would you rather have Maxx Crosby, who is getting analyzed by these doctors, and there's a potential knee issue, and you don't know if he's going to be good for the future? Like, the future assessment of Crosby doesn't really look good or doesn't really look promising. So would you rather have Maxx Crosby, who is a better player than Trey Hendrickson, and he kind of has that knee issue that you have to worry about, and you don't have your 2 first-round picks? Or would you rather pivot to getting Trey Hendrickson, who, again, in terms of getting to the quarterback, you can argue Trey Hendrickson's better than Maxx Crosby at getting to the quarterback. Maxx Crosby is a way better run stopper, but Trey Hendrickson, in terms of getting to the quarterback, does have more career sacks than Crosby, does have better sack seasons than Crosby. So you get Trey Hendrickson, who is a superstar pass rusher, and you get to keep your 2 first-round picks. And if I'm going to be completely honest with you, and I'm not even saying this because that's the situation we're in right now, for me, I would honestly rather have the 2 first-round picks, the number 14 pick in this draft, obviously, being the first-round pick this year, and having Trey Hendrickson, That's what I would rather have. Obviously, when we learned earlier today that the idea that the Ravens potentially were going to pair up Trey Hendrickson and Maxx Crosby, that makes me sick to my stomach, because just knowing that that was a possibility and just having the scenario be the biggest what-if scenario in Baltimore Ravens history. That's what this is going to be. You know, Maxx Crosby is the biggest what-if player in Ravens history. But what I will say is that the past 24 hours have been pretty hectic for Eric DeCosta. He's had to make some pretty big, difficult decisions. Obviously, the decision to back out of the Maxx Crosby trade because of the failed physical was a big thing. And again, there was a report earlier today that Eric DeCosta and the Ravens were still willing to make things work with Crosby, and they were, going to the Raiders, and they were going to renegotiate a new trade for Crosby because that's how badly they wanted him. So for anybody saying that we backed out of the deal because we just pivoted, or we got, buyer's remorse, or we got cold feet or whatever, for people that say that, if you see what Eric DeCosta's tone sounded like when he knew that he wasn't going to land Crosby, he sounded devastated, and he even, there was the reports that said that he was willing to make things work with Crosby. Even though he failed his physical, they were willing to make things work, they were willing to renegotiate a trade, and they were willing to still keep Maxx Crosby on their team because that's how much they liked him. But what I want to say with Eric DeCosta, and I'm being completely honest when I say this, I am very proud of Eric DeCosta, of how quickly he pivoted to Trey Hendrickson and how quickly he's trying to move on from this situation. The Ravens made a couple of other signings today that are pretty interesting. They're just filler signings of some of the guys that we ended up losing in free agency, but they're pretty good signings. One of them I really like, actually. But I'm really proud of Eric DeCosta for pivoting to Trey Hendrickson because, again, from a fan's perspective, he knows that the fan base knew that Maxx Crosby was coming to Baltimore, and he saw the excitement around the league, and he saw the excitement around the city. So, obviously, with that not happening anymore, he saw the outrage on Twitter. He saw the outrage on social media last night when we learned that they were backing out of the deal. So I'm really proud of Eric DeCosta for committing to Trey Hendrickson and making sure that we land him, because a lot of people last night were saying, well, now if they don't pivot to Trey Hendrickson and get Trey Hendrickson, now they lost out on Maxx Crosby, they lost out on Trey Hendrickson, which are the top two of the best edge rushers in the NFL. Trey Hendrickson, obviously the best free agent available and the best edge rusher in free agency available. If the Ravens weren't able to land either of those guys, which obviously the Crosby deal they ended up backing out, plus losing all the free agents, then it would have probably gone down as the worst offseason in NFL history. But the Ravens were able to salvage that entire Crosby situation. They backed out of the trade less than 24 hours before it became official. It was like 19 or 20 hours before it became official. They pivoted to Trey Hendrickson, and now we move forward with still having a superstar pass rusher, but we also get to keep our 2 first-round picks. So, to be honest with you, this might be best-case scenario for the Ravens. This might be a blessing in disguise. Maybe Maxx Crosby will never be the same player again. Obviously, I don't hope that on him, but it is definitely going to be something that Baltimore fans are going to, look into, and definitely something that Baltimore fans are going to watch, because it's a very interesting situation, a very big what if. What if he was a Raven? There was literally graphics out there of him in the jersey swap. He was in Baltimore doing his physical yesterday. Obviously, when ended up learning everything. It was just a crazy scenario, man. It was a crazy situation, and I'm kind of on the fence of I just want to move on with Trey Hendrickson being our superstar edge rusher. We sign him to the contract. We move forward to the draft. We move forward to free agency, and there's still a lot of moves to be made. Now talking about some other things that happened today regarding the Ravens, because the Ravens had until 4 p.m. today to restructure Lamar's contract or sign him to an extension to create more room to get them under the cap. So, the Ravens officially reworked the contract of Lamar Jackson. Sources say the restructure with Jackson creates about $40 million extra in the salary cap for the 2026 season. It's similar to what Mahomes and Josh Allen did for their teams this offseason. So, Lamar Jackson didn't sign an extension like everyone was hoping and like everyone was expecting, but he did get his contract restructured to where he's not getting paid as much this season, but I think next year his cap hit is like $86 or $88 million. So obviously we're going to have to figure that out by then. But we restructured the contract. I think the Ravens have around $60 to $70 million in cap space right now. So they have a lot of money to go out there and make some moves. Obviously, the big free agents are off the board. The Ravens really grabbed like the last big free agent off the board in Trey Hendrickson. But, there's still trades that they can make. Obviously, they were very aggressive in trading their first-round picks for Maxx Crosby. There is a world out there and there is a scenario out there that they still can trade a first-round pick this year or next year to try and maybe acquire a player, just like they did with Crosby. So we'll see what ends up happening. We'll see if they stick and draft players, or we'll see if they make some moves with some trades. There's some guys out there who I'd be interested in getting. Obviously, A.J. Brown's name has been floating around. Brian Thomas Jr.'s name has been floating around as well. There's a bunch of different trades that I think the Ravens could definitely benefit from. We'll see what ends up happening. Obviously, there are some holes on this team. I am going to go over in just a second of all the guys who have left the Ravens because it is quite a bit. There's a lot of players leaving the Ravens, and a lot of them are going to the Giants because Harbaugh is taking our players. But the Ravens have some holes on the offensive line with the backup tight end, with the center, I was going to say safety help, but they got that today. So the offense especially does have some holes. Maybe get another receiver besides Zay. There's things that need to be worked out. There's trades that still can be made. But with the way that everything's gone with the Ravens, they are not in a horrible scenario right now, and they just move forward with what they got. And this right here is a graphic of everyone that the Ravens have gained and lost. There are 3 more additions that I do want to add on here. Obviously, we're going to add Trey Hendrickson over to the left side. We're going to add a couple of other players that we're going to go over in a second. But just mainly focusing here on the losses. Obviously, when we look at the additions, John Simpson used to be a Raven. Drafted him, was with the team back around like 2022, 2023. He was pretty good for us. He went to the Jets. He's been okay since he's been there. We just brought him back to the Ravens on a 3-year, $30 million deal. He's going to fill one of those guard spots, which is great. When we look at the losses, you lose Maxx Crosby due to a failed physical. You lose Isaiah Likely to the Giants, which really sucks. This is probably the one that I'm most upset about, is losing Isaiah Likely. Obviously, the Ravens ended up signing Mark Andrews long-term. I've publicly come out and said how I did not support that and how I was very much against that because I knew we were going to lose Isaiah Likely, and for him to go to the Giants, for him to reunite with Harbaugh does kind of suck a little bit. Charlie Kohler signing with the Chargers. This one sucks as well. Linderbaum signing with the Raiders. This is the biggest deal that happened. Pat Ricard goes to the Giants. A.D. Washington goes to the Giants. Jake Hummel goes to the Texans. Alohi Gilman goes to the Chiefs. Draymond Jones goes to the Patriots. And Jordan Stouter, punter, goes to the Giants. But when you look at all of this free agency frenzy that is going on, obviously there's some more names that I want to talk about for the additions. But when you look at the losses, man, I mean, this sucks. I mean, Isaiah Likely, Tyler Linderbaum, Pat Ricard, Draymond Jones even, obviously the Maxx Crosby failed physical. All of this is really crazy. And a big reason why the Ravens weren't able to bring back some of these players is because we already had Maxx Crosby in the books, and we were already thinking about a potential deal that we were going to, revise and give him. But we already had Maxx Crosby's contract in our books, trying to figure out what our salary was going to be. So we didn't end up re-signing some Ravens players, and it was going to be harder to re-sign Ravens players because we already were taking on Maxx Crosby's contract in our minds. So the Raiders, who may or may not have lied about Maxx Crosby's situation, and agent may or may not have lied about his situation. Obviously, there was something that we didn't like. There was something that a lot of teams didn't, or a lot of other doctors didn't like as well. And we made the decision to just not end up pursuing the Crosby trade. And people are going to call the Ravens dumb. People are going to say that it was the wrong decision. People are going to say that he's too elite of a player to just do that. But again, you have to look at it. You have to look at it from what the Ravens are giving up. 2 first-round draft picks is a lot for a player. Obviously, Maxx Crosby deserves it because he is an incredible needle-moving player, but so is Trey Hendrickson. Again, I'm not going to get into the comparison. I mean, people are going to compare their seasons a lot this upcoming year, which is, valid because, again, we went from Maxx Crosby to Trey Hendrickson. There's positives and negatives to both sides. It's just an insane situation, man. Like, I did not think that the Ravens were going to be this much in the spotlight. I thought we were going to trade for Maxx Crosby, go through the free agency process, and just see how things go. But again, this failed physical and this knee situation, and then backing out and getting Trey Hendrickson and keeping your picks, and then, restructuring Lamar's contract and having a lot of money. it opened up a lot of possibilities for the Ravens for the rest of this offseason and for what they can do. It potentially, they can go through the draft and, stay where they are at 14. They could potentially trade up in the draft for someone if they really like someone falling, maybe like a Reuben Bain or a David Bailey if they start falling. They could potentially use these picks. I don't think that they're going to trade 2 first-round picks for another player, but I do think it's possible that they maybe trade their first-round pick this year or their first-round pick next year to potentially try and maybe pursue a trade for someone, because they now have more salary and more money to take on contracts for big players. So, again, A.J. Brown was getting floated around, Brian Thomas Jr. potentially for the receiving market. If we don't end up trading for one of those receivers, I do think it's really possible that we could end up signing like a Stephon Diggs or a Juwan Jennings or someone like that. I know that we were in the market potentially for Mike Evans, but again, we'll see what ends up happening. Obviously, this is only, day 3 of free agency, and so much has happened. This Maxx Crosby and Baltimore Ravens situation has sent shockwaves around the NFL, both whenever it happened and also when it didn't happen. So just crazy, crazy, crazy times in Baltimore. But I'm under the assumption now that you kind of just move on. Again, you kind of just move on from everything that's happened. It's been a crazy, crazy time, but you didn't get the Crosby trade done. You don't even think about it. You backed out of the deal. You ended up still getting an elite superstar edge rusher in Trey Hendrickson, and you move forward with the picks, and you move forward with what you have, and you just let the things fall in place. And going over some of the things that the Ravens did today, they made they made what? 4 signings today the Ravens did. Obviously, we talked about the Trey Hendrickson signing in depth, but when we look at another thing that they did today, this wasn't a new signing. This was actually just a re-signing for a player that was on the team last year. The Ravens agreed to a 1-year, $5 million, it says $5 million deal with Chidobe Awuzie. So Chidobe Awuzie, he was on the Ravens last year. He was a corner for the Ravens. We signed him to a 1-year deal last year just as like a veteran piece, and he ended up having some really good moments for the Ravens, ended up playing some pretty good football for the Ravens, and that's what we did here. Bringing back Chidobe Awuzie, played well for the Ravens last year, brought him back on a 1-year, $5 million deal. Pretty cheap. Obviously, we have a lot of cap to work with right now. And after these little moves that I'm going to talk about, with these little moves, I do think that they're potentially gearing up for another potentially big move in the trade market. But I do love to see these things. Obviously, this right here is kind of, with these little signings, we're just trying to replace some of the guys that ended up leaving. Just trying to, replace some guys. Obviously, some of the guys that ended up leaving, we might not think that the positions are very important and they're maybe easily replaceable. And again, that's why we wanted them or just let them leave. But we bring back Chidobe Awuzie. You love to see it. I'm completely fine with bringing back Awuzie. Just more corner depth, veteran corner to add back to that cornerback room. The cornerback room is pretty much going to be the exact same as it was last year with Chidobe back, so you love to see that there. Mike Mickens, obviously, working for the Ravens now, who is like a legendary DB coach in college, so he's going to make sure that these guys are right. Going over to another signing that the Ravens have done today, it's that they agreed to terms with free agent tight end Durham Smythe. He will likely be the Charlie Kolar replacement and fill the blocking tight end role in Baltimore. Smythe, who has 136 career catches, was also with the new Ravens OC Declan Doyle in Chicago last year. So Durham Smythe last year was the tight end 3 for Chicago behind Cole Kmet and Colston Loveland. So Durham Smythe more was the blocking tight end guy. He's going to pretty much have the exact same role as a Charlie Kolar would. Charlie Kolar, in my opinion, his pass catching was very underrated. He was a very solid pass catcher. But Durham Smythe, he's going to pretty much just be the blocking tight end role. He's going to fill that Charlie Kolar replacement. So this is the official Charlie Kolar replacement, which you'd love to see. I like to see the Ravens going out there and trying to replace some of these guys that they ended up losing, because it opened up some new holes alongside the other holes that they already had. But getting Durham Smythe, I like this signing. He's familiar with Declan Doyle. You always love to see teams signing players of guys who are familiar to new players in your building or to new coaches in your building. Declan Doyle, obviously, he's the new offensive coordinator in Baltimore. Durham Smythe, he had connections with him already when they were in Chicago last season. So this is a great signing. Completely fine with this. Love the blocking tight end role. Watched a couple clips of him with the blocking, and it looks great. So I'm excited for this. I'm excited to see what we can do here. Getting the Charlie Kolar replacement, you love to see it. And yeah, we just move on. And going over to the final thing that the Ravens ended up doing today, the final signing of 4 signings that they did today. They agreed on a 2-year, $10 million deal, so $5 million per season, to former New England Patriots safety Jalen Hawkins. He is going to be the new number 3 safety in Baltimore. Key role given how the Ravens use Kyle Hamilton. So basically, the reason why this is important is for 2 reasons. One, we saw not necessarily what exactly Alohi Gilman did on his own, but whenever we would run a 3 safety defense, we saw how good the defense looked, and we also saw how good Kyle Hamilton looked, because when we're running a 3 safety defense, Kyle Hamilton isn't necessarily always playing in the back. When we're running 3 safety defense, we would usually put Gilman and Starks in the back, and then we would kind of move Kyle Hamilton all around the field. He could maybe play in the back, he could play linebacker, he could play edge, he could play D-tackle even, why not? Again, we know how valuable of a player Kyle Hamilton is. I think, in my opinion, he is the most valuable player on defense in the NFL, because, again, for all the positions that he plays, for how versatile he is, and getting the new safety Jalen Hawkins, this is literally just the Alohi Gilman replacement, because Jalen Hawkins, he's younger than Alohi Gilman. I saw a couple of his stats, saw a couple of his highlights, and he looked incredible. I mean, this guy is an absolute dog. A bunch of Patriots fans were saying that this guy is severely underrated. He was one of the 2 starting safeties for the Patriots. We ended up getting him on a really cheap deal. He's going to come in and be that 3rd safety for Baltimore, but I would suspect he's still going to see the field a lot. I'm sure it's going to be Kyle Hamilton on the field alongside Malachi Starks and Jalen Hawkins. So the safety depth is completely filled. The 3rd string tight end, blocking tight end role is filled. Also getting some more cornerback depth in Chidobe Awuzie. And then obviously getting the superstar edge rusher in Trey Hendrickson is filled. So it was a pretty good day for the Ravens. We'll go over a little bit of a recap in a second. But Jalen Hawkins, watching some of these guys' highlights and seeing what a lot of Patriots fans are saying, this guy is a dog, and this guy is going to be a potential game changer. He had 4 interceptions this past year. He was 5th in overall safety grade of 98 graded safeties. He was 5th on the safety grade rating. That is incredible. That is ridiculous. You know, he was kind of like a glue role for the Patriots, and that's what a lot of safeties are. You know, the safety position is not as valued as it probably should be. Kyle Hamilton definitely puts a lot of emphasis on the safety role, but the thing with Kyle Hamilton is that he's one of one. There's no other safety in the NFL that plays the way that Kyle Hamilton does. He's like a Shohei Ohtani, because there's no other safety in the NFL that moves around as much as Kyle does. There's nobody that rushes the quarterback as much as he does, plays linebacker in the middle, or will play back, or even will play a corner role on some tight ends. So the safety role is very important. The Ravens run a lot of 3 safeties. We saw how good it made Kyle Hamilton look, and I'm sure that Jesse Minter is going to make this guy look like a beast, and I'm also sure that Jesse Minter is going to be calling a lot of 3 tight end personnel or 3 safety personnel because of the fact of how much it unlocks Kyle Hamilton. But when we look at a recap here of the Ravens' day for Day 3 of free agency, obviously it was a crazy day yesterday. The Maxx Crosby trade ended up falling out. We backed out of the Crosby deal. It was a crazy situation. But looking at what we see today, the Ravens signed Trey Hendrickson. The Lamar contract was reworked to free up $40 million. The Ravens brought back Chidobe Awuzie, who's a veteran corner. The Ravens signed Jalen Hawkins, who's going to be our number 3 safety. We brought in a tight end, Durham Smythe, to be the blocking tight end and to be the Charlie Kolar replacement. So, yeah, it was a pretty good day, if you ask me. Pretty good day for the Ravens. You love to kind of see them working hard here and filling up some of the holes, like Jalen Hawkins being the Gilman replacement, signing Durham Smythe to be the Charlie Kolar replacement, bringing back Awuzie to be another veteran corner. But there still is things that they need to work on. Obviously, they need to go out there and get a center. They don't have a center. They need to fix the center position. They need to fix one of the guard spots. They need to fix the receiver room, getting a veteran receiver in there, or just another receiver in that room besides Zay. They need to get another backup tight end who can actually catch the ball besides Mark Andrews. There's potential that we could be looking maybe at a David Njoku, or maybe even looking at like a tight end in the draft, because there's quite a few good tight ends in this draft. So getting a backup tight end to play alongside Mark Andrews, and we know how good and we know how important it is to have two good tight ends in the NFL, especially for someone like Declan Doyle, who is the offensive coordinator, because he just was on a team with Cole Kmet and Colson Loveland, and how both of them were a big part of that Bears offense. So getting a backup tight end. Defensively, maybe looking at the D tackles. Again, we don't really know much about the situation with Nnamdi Madubuike. Apparently, he's looking good. Apparently, things are looking good. And he potentially is going to be playing this season, which is great, which is really great work. And again, it's like acquiring a free agent, which, again, he's one of the best D tackles in the league. I don't know how he's going to look post-injury, but, again, we'll see what ends up happening there. But pretty good day for the Ravens, I would say. They did an amazing move to pivot to Trey Hendrickson. Again, that's all they could do. Some people are going to look at it like we were doing some sneaky stuff. Some people are going to look at it and hate us for doing what we did. But again, it's not that we pivoted to Trey Hendrickson because we just like Trey Hendrickson more or we thought it was a better scenario. We pivoted to Trey Hendrickson because we were desperate and it was our only move we could make after we couldn't get Maxx Crosby. But thank you guys so much for tuning into and listening to Birds of a Feather. If you like this content, make sure to subscribe on YouTube, follow up on Spotify, make sure to click the link in the bio to check out the Twitter and the Instagram. I post all the time on there, so make sure to give that a look. Make sure to give those things a follow. I appreciate y'all so much. Baseball season is coming up very, very soon here in the next couple of weeks. We will be full on Oriole pilled. It'll be full Orioles content. Obviously, it'll be full Orioles content, but when Ravens things are happening, we're going to go over Ravens stuff. Obviously, the WBC is happening right now. Spring training's happening right now for the Orioles. Nothing major is really going on for the Orioles right now until the season starts. In a couple weeks, we are going to do a season preview for the Orioles. But for right now, with all this hectic Ravens news going on, we had to cover that and go over it over the past few episodes. But again, we'll cover anything Ravens related for free agency when time comes up. We'll be doing mock drafts here over the next month because, again, we have our first round picks back, so we're going to be back doing mock draft season for the Ravens. Some guys that I think that I would like. I already have some guys in mind, but once we get about 1 month until the draft, we'll start doing weekly mock drafts. And then obviously when the Orioles season starts, we are going to be fully committing to them as well. So again, back in the swing of things, season 2 really of Birds of a Feather, if that's what you want to call it. I appreciate you guys so much. I'll see you guys in the next one. You have a great sales day. Go O's, go Ravens, and I'll see you later. Peace out.